Hello everyone. I shot a video here about a month ago, and we looked at this particular structure here, which is a check dam. And we could see at that time it had rained earlier, and we could see that there had been a spillover and pretty significant erosion here, going on down the trail. And in that video, I suggested that sometimes these are self-healing. The trails in this area are self-healing. There was still a fair bit of moisture in the soil when I shot that original video. Things have dried out since then, although we might have gotten a little bit of rain last night. It rained down in Bend. I'm not sure how much or if they got anything up here, but I suggested that as things dry out, what happens is soil on the sides gets displaced by hikers and by horses. This trail's not open to bikes. And it sort of starts to fill in. And so we see that effect. The erosional effect that I showcased earlier does not look nearly as dramatic today as it did in that original video. And that's that sort of self-healing effect that I was talking about. Again, especially horses. Horses are kind of on the outside edges. They're not right in the V. They're to the left and to the right because of the width of their natural stance and their natural gait. And because they do displace a fair bit of soil as they're walking, that's what I call their physics of propulsion. And then also they have shoes, which is made out of metal, which is clearly significantly harder than any soil type that we have, especially our dry soil type here. And so they do displace a fair bit of soil, just sort of kicking it behind the horse's hooves, especially the back hooves, but also the front hooves as well. And that soil sort of starts to collect, in the lowest point. And like I say, we definitely see that. This trail shows, I can see it, but the average user very well might not see the water-based erosion that we were seeing earlier when I shot that original video. So yeah, that's an interesting observation. That's why I wanted to come out today and kind of follow up on this and take another look. You can still definitely see signs of, a big sediment load right here. And that's kind of what checks are intended to do, is to slow water down and have it drop out its soil. And you still can definitely see, a little bit of that waterfall effect that I talked about in my earlier video. But notice that there's organic material that has collected, little sticks and some pine needles. So that was since that rainstorm and that earlier video, we see some organic matter filling back in there. We see it down here. So that's telling me that if it did rain last night, that there was not a heavy rain, not a lot of rain in this particular location. Obviously, these afternoon thunderstorms are spotty, and one place may get some rain, and pretty close by doesn't get any rain whatsoever. So, and as we walk up the trail again, it just kind of looks like it's all okay. And so it will be easy to assume that it is in fact all okay. But as my original video showcased, this trail is distinctively losing some soil. We're not anywhere close to water, so it certainly is not a sedimentation issue in terms of getting into a trout stream like we would find in western North Carolina. But nonetheless, this trail distinctively, as most trails do, could benefit from additional water management. And I've touched on this before, and it came up during the Deschutes Trails Coalition meeting, and that is that, log out is always the focus. And depending on where you're working, particularly if you're working in an old fire scar, you know, and 3 to 5 years later, lots of that stuff starts falling. You know, then the log out consumes the bulk of the volunteer's time and energy. And brushing may, you know, be sort of a secondary, because it sort of does have more of a negative effect on users if things get too brushy. Whereas tread and drainage is kind of, I call it blind, or invisible. The blindness is in the users. The invisibleness is, you know, people don't know what they're looking at. They don't know what they're looking for. But nonetheless, tread and drainage is important. I hiked a trail recently, and it was 3 to 4 feet below grade. You know, I could go thousands of linear feet without any water management whatsoever. And thus why it's below grade. Because users loosen soil, again, especially horses, they definitely loosen soil. And then that soil is available to be taken away in the next rainstorm. And then the cycle just repeats. So anyway, yeah, I mean, this trail looks better now than it did when I was here a month or so ago, because of that sort of self-healing effect. All right, what are you checking out?